Welcome. We are having another meeting today, but this is all about the Socialist Party, the formation of the. One second. Okay. It's about the formation of the California Socialist Party. You can join the discussion. Here you go. One second. Let me. Sorry, I got seriously distracted earlier today. Okay. What am I trying to do? I want to go here. I want to do this. I want to post that. Okay. Join the discussion. Okay, so join the discussion. And here's the stream. If you are lying about who you are or you're relevant, I will kick you from the stream in a second. Julina Acosta, awesome for you to be here. John Drake's here. Daniel Santoro is here. Jason Wright, CEO, is here. We're going to have a discussion about the California Socialist Party and its formation. Been working on it for a couple of weeks. Have some great information to share with everybody. You, the public, are invited to join the discussion. But first, let me turn it over to John Drake and Jason Wright. Let's go first to John, and then we'll go to commentary from Jason. John, I understand you're going on 17 hours without sleep, but if you can, to the best you can, what is the Socialist Party in your opinion, and why the hell does California need one, in your opinion? And then, Jason, I'm going to ask you the same two questions. These are the basic questions everybody's going to ask us, and I figured, why not go to the two leaders and say, why even have this party? Why even care? Why even try? John, and then Jason. John Drake, please.
So to me, the Socialist Party is the party that California not only needs but deserves. For decades, Californians have been told, if you vote Democrat, you'll get universal health care. You'll get you'll get universal child care, health care. You'll get that free college education that is necessary to move up in the job market. You'll get that affordable housing, but none of it's happened. And in fact, situations have only gotten worse for the average Californian, for middle class Californians, for poor and working Californians. And the only people who have seemingly improved from these situations have been the ultra wealthy and the extremely rich. And so and we're even we're getting to this precipice in California where we're sort of heading reaching this point of no return. I mean, you even have houses in Los Angeles now that rich people that we would consider very rich compared to us can't even afford these houses. $100 million homes are coming up on the market because of all the inflated prices in housing, and it's not going to get better. There is this elitist mentality amongst Democrats, and of the Democrats that do want to make a change, they do not have the power to do so because they have a party to appease, or the national organization that is the DNC won't allow there to be certain lines being passed or crossed because they don't want to seemingly support something in California that may not bode well in another state, where they have to sort of be sort of wish-washy in order to appease certain voters in a different place. This party says, we are for California, we care about Californians, we have an identity here, and we want to be able to push that identity because because it's not only something that we believe in, it's who we are. And so that's why I'm establishing this party, because for so long we've just been given nothing. I mean, when we have Nancy Pelosi representing San Francisco in the United States Congress, in the House of Representatives, backing a pro-life Democrat in Texas, that's not California values. I mean, you could say, well, it's for the bigger picture. It's a step back. It's not for the bigger picture because that's not something that we support, because that makes enshrining things like a woman's right to choose what it is they want to do in terms of pregnancy. That's a step backwards. And we as Californians do not respect legislation that is contrary to that. And so that's why this party exists. That's why we're pushing it. And that's why I believe it's going to become very, very popular. I mean, I'm talking to people at my work. I'm talking to people on the street. I talk, especially to younger people, whether it's in college or online or on social media. They are dying for something like this. They want something that steps out of this sort of wish-washy neoliberal free market thing that isn't working, because this laissez-faire mentality has only made situations worse for not just Californians but everyone, but most particularly for California. The wealth disparity in this state is astronomical.
Nice, nice. Okay, let's go to Jason. You just heard from John Drake about the Socialist Party and what it is. Now we're going to hear from Jason Wright answering the same two questions. What is the party and why do we need it? Jason Wright, how would you answer those two questions for the public about what the Socialist Party is and why we need one in California?
Give me a second, actually.
Okay. John, do you have anything else to say about this subject?
I guess I kind of mainly emphasized what it is. I mean why we need it. I guess to emphasize what it is that it's essentially this new party that is a lot more left and more particularly it's pro California, meaning that we're going to care a lot more about what benefits Californians and what matters to Californians over this sort of reaching across the aisle in the federal government to try and appease every single person. Like I'm sort of done with that, because it's one reason why we have had nothing accomplished in Congress. We have nothing. We've had no real positive legislation that comes out in benefit of California, and it's a major reason why Californians foot the bill for the vast majority of red states that don't even really like us. I mean, that's essentially what this party is, and it's this revolutionary idea, and more than idea, it's a movement, and I believe that in 20 years down the line, it will not only be a movement, it'll be a way of life.
Nice. Well, let me cover a couple facts. This is just some facts that we put together while we've been doing research. So this is proof of the market for socialism. Now, on top of what John's been saying about, and if you go and watch John's channel, his Twitter page, whatever, and if you watch the Yes California, CalExit Congress meetings we've had on this, every time we discuss this, there's all sorts of new voices and young people coming forward and showing support. So if you watch the videos on John's channel, if you watch the videos on our channel, you can see there are new faces that always come forward and express support, meaning there's a market there. But if we're going to get into more hard statistics, here's some of the ones that prove there is a market for a socialist party in California that's largely been ignored by the California Democrats. So number one, in the 2020 election, Bernie Sanders gained 36% of the Democratic presidential primary. California Democratic primary to Joe Biden's 28%. That means Bernie, the socialist, the avowed socialist, beat Joe Biden, the avowed not socialist and progressive, by 8 points. That's huge. So in California, last major election, more Californians picked the socialist over the not socialist. Those are California Democratic voters. More California Democratic voters voted for the socialist than the not socialist by almost 10 percentage points in the last election. That is not hyperbole. Here's a quote. If nothing else, Senator Bernie Sanders' robust showing in the California Democratic primary proves this. In the state that gave the nation Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and the anti-tax revolt, a decisive chunk of the Democratic electorate is no longer allergic to the word socialism. That's from Cal Matters, a major policy magazine here in California, March 3rd, 2020. We'd also look at 2016. where Bernie had 46% of vote and Hillary had 53%. Again, for a presidential primary here in California, Bernie almost tied with Hillary and was essentially within the margin of error in the 2016 election. So the 2020 election, Bernie the Socialist outright beat the mainstream Dem. In the 2016 election, Bernie the Socialist almost tied with the mainstream Dem. So see how he's just underneath, and then the next election, he's like way above. That's hard facts. That's 2016, that's 2020. This is the pattern. Also, they did a poll, a CBS poll, taken the week before Election Day by CBS. The poll found that among California Democratic primary voters, 57% said they had a positive view of socialism. CBS poll, California Democratic Party voters, 57% positive view of socialism. We can also look at 1934 with Upton Sinclair, the muckraking author of The Jungle, ran seeking the Democratic nominee for governor and won it decisively with over 50% of the vote. John and Jason, what do you think that means? So we have multiple elections where the socialist is doing better than the Democrat, and multiple, surveys showing that this allergic reaction to socialism is basically going away when we look at major news sources like Cal Matters and CBS polling. What does that mean to you, John Drake and Jason Wright? Is California ready for socialism? Because for me, the thing I see is the Democrats are not talking to these people, and we're talking about 1/3 to over 1/2 of the California electorate not being approached by the California Democrats because they will have nothing to do with Bernie Sanders.
Well, I would say I don't think Californians have ever not been allergic to the word socialism. Or I should say, I don't think Californians have ever been allergic to the word socialism. It's just that the powers that be have never allowed that market to exist in California. For example, after the 1930s, there were many after World War II, and especially during the Cold War, California itself instituted a lot of anti-left wing policies that prevented hard left politicians from holding office, from hard left parties from even being able to exist in the state of California. The Communist Party of California wasn't even allowed to hold office until that policy was revoked in the early 2010s. And so I don't think that has necessarily I don't think Californians' appeal to socialism hasn't existed. I think it's always been there. It's just that Democrats and Republicans have done their best to keep it out of the mainstream because they are threatened by it. Because socialism and definitely a socialist party would be able to have a lot more power and a lot more sway over voters than the current parties do. The Republicans, even during a time when Republicans controlled the state, when Republicans controlled the legislature, the governorship, the vast majority of offices, socialists and progressive candidates within the Democratic Party have always been popular, and that's never gone away. And in fact, it's only continued to get better and only continued to get more progressive because newer generations are coming along and they're saying, hey, what we have here, what's going on is not working. And especially with this younger generation that's coming about, that's grown up through COVID, that's grown up through a failing housing market, that's growing up in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt before they can even start a career, where they can't afford a single bedroom apartment. Well, where many of them are even struggling to even conceptualize starting a family because it's so expensive to live. Of course, I think that market has always been there, but the powers that be have done their best to stifle these movements from existing. I mean, Democrats can be all for workers' rights till the cows come home. They can cry that as much as they want, but their policies and their actions show the exact opposite. They do not care about us. Otherwise, they would be passing a lot more policies that would actually be lowering the cost of living. But in fact, the policies that they are pushing are increasing it. You can build all the housing you want, but until you hit that fundamental policy that makes it so that people can afford that housing, not just have an abundance of housing, but be able to afford that housing through either increased wages, through better working hours, through increased benefits, universal health care, child care, education, then anything else is moot. We need to be able to solve the affordability crisis, and no one in power is doing that. And for those who are trying, they are being stifled by the establishment that exists in Sacramento, and especially the ones that exist in Washington, D.C.
Jason.
Yeah, so I've got a message here from Julina. She dropped again because she's driving, but she still tuned in for a good deal of what John said. She was trying to mention that the housing situation, while John was talking about that, along the coast has gotten so bad that businesses are closing because they can't find any employees. There are no available houses or affordable housing because of the property owners that are, it seems, mainly using their houses for Airbnb, renting it out to tourists so that they can afford to live in San Francisco over in Pelosi's district. And I totally agree with that assessment. I have a niece who lives in Fortuna, which has like next to zero population. Like they say jokingly, it's an 80-person town, but it's actually closer to like 50 or 60. It's very small. It's kind of drying up. The businesses are closing because, you know, people aren't living there and there's no one to run businesses. And then because other businesses are failing and now you can't find certain services or things or goods, people are moving away to places where they can find all of that. So yeah, I definitely see the issues that our party is tackling are actually going to start to help addressing some of that.
Okay, but so just to, because we were asking the question a little bit earlier, so let me go back to the basics. How would you define the Socialist Party? Why do we have a Socialist Party? Why do we need it? And what did you think of John's description of the Socialist Party? We need to get those responses from
you. Okay, yeah, sorry. So one part at a time. First part is what is?
Yeah, what is this Socialist Party? Why should people care? What is this thing going to be?
Oh, okay,
Why do we even need it?
just one part. Just one part. Yeah. Sorry, I'm. It's just. Okay, so one part at a time.
Yeah.
So what is the Socialist Party of California? The Socialist Party of California is a brand new fledgling party that is still in formation, nearing completion. Built under the principles of socialism, a societal responsibility to itself, meaning that rather than, or pretty much antithetical to, the way that the current corporate autocracy runs, where the people serve the government, which serves the corporations or, you know, business entities, which are then supposed to just barely cover the people enough that they can, you know, continue to feed the machine. Rather than that, the principles of socialism actually are pretty much the opposite, where the government exists only really to maintain, monitor, make sure that things keep running. And its real only true priority is to the people and the overall entity. So for us, it would be California, which means all of California, all of her people, her land, her resources, all of it. Securing that, protecting that, making sure it's safe, bettering that, whether it's the people, the land, a person or a group of people or a chunk of land, a specific area of land, right? Or a specific type of land, like, say, the federally controlled yet grossly neglected swaths of California. Just to name an example, right?
Right.
It's bent on making sure that society can continue, whereas the current, capitalist kind of system is bent on making sure that money keeps being money and making more money. Notice how there is a distinct lack of people and humanity, society, any sort of structuring, right? It's just all about money. So, the Socialist Party being built on the foundations of socialism means that we also, as Californians, right? So we're Californians who are going to practice this societal responsibility, right? We are going to, let's see, how to, sorry, there's a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
My apologies. So we are going to, one, make sure that this society that we have becomes actually truly representative to itself, right? Because what it is now is representative of people being subjugated by a machine that exists to serve the few. At the direct cost of the people and society. So we are going to be, working towards that end, and also because of that, working towards making a better future. Right now, the potential future that we all look at as Californians is rather bleak. Looks like it's going to be miserable because we're still just being drained dry by the federal government. We don't get to control ourselves anywhere near as much as we really should. We don't get to decide for ourselves anywhere near as much as we really should. This party can effectively, through adequate representation of the people and the wants and needs of California, can actually provide an outlet for us to think and act accordingly for ourselves based on what we as Californians want and need. And that's because ultimately this party is not going to be beholden to the corporate Dems, the corporate Republicans, any sellouts of any kind, right? We will be beholden to California and all that makes up what is Californian. So that's all of us Californians. That's all of our different varying cultures. That's all of our varying different creeds and religions and, you know, socioeconomic standings in life. I mean, how many homeless people are there in California? Now, just because someone's homeless, does that mean they're not a voter? No. Actually, there are a lot of people who are falling on hard times who have been regular voters their whole lives, their whole adult lives. So, you know, just an example, corporate sellouts on both sides readily disregard and look at the homeless folks and the issue of homelessness. They look at homeless people as if they are the enemy for some reason. What they might be the enemy of, I'm not entirely sure, but they get vilified, and basically, I mean, we get people on both sides who push to round up homeless people and put them into forced labor camps. Gavin Newsom, current governor, even said that he was considering something pretty much that. I mean, sure, maybe I'm paraphrasing it a little, but I mean, it really read as like fascist Nazi Germany, World War II. We're going to round up these people who we see are not us and force them to work for us and generate revenue for us in these prison camps. Like, it doesn't matter what side of the fence they're on, team red, team blue, it doesn't matter. If they're a corporate sellout, their interest is money and making more money and having money generate more money. No matter what it costs, no matter who it costs, no matter who has to pay the price, as long as it's not them or their children. But, you know.
That's your summary of the Socialist Party, is that it is a different opinion on homelessness?
Well, yeah, so under a socialist structure of anything, right? True socialism. Because the government is only there to serve the society which has built it, that means that homelessness would have to actually be adequately looked at, appropriately addressed, and ultimately fixed, solved. Because having people of society be productive members of society is much more beneficial to everyone, all across the board in the long run. And there are many modern first world nations, especially over in Europe, that, I mean, you know, some of you know I'm a total Swamiliophile or a Finnophile. Finland has solved homelessness for themselves. Like they don't have homelessness. They don't have a homeless problem. They proved there is a way to do it, and it's actually rather easy. It's called society needs to take care of itself. People being productive members of society is better for everyone and everything. Leaving people to die out on the streets just makes everything look bad, feel worse. It's just no good. And ignoring the problem, no matter what the problem is, but especially homelessness, ignoring the problem will never do anything. Inaction is just inaction. So corporate Dems, corporate sellouts, corporate Dems and reps, right? They see this large homeless population as a commodity, a workforce, a means to make more money. What socialists see homelessness as is a very real sign, a very tangible sign that our society needs fixing, that it needs work, that we are failing ourselves and our own people. And that if we fix it, it'll get better. Socialism says you gotta do it because it's the kind of a good thing to do. Like, it's called smart business. You could, pay everyone $1 an hour, sure. But how long are people going to work for you? And when those people quit, how likely are you to find more people who will work for $1 an hour? Especially when the cost of living is more like $25 an hour. Socialism says, yeah, sure, you could, but that's not good business. That's a dumb business move that will bankrupt your company because it is not sustainable. It is detrimental. The socialist sees that paying the living wage means that those workers will, one, feel like actually showing up to work on time. Two, actually do their jobs and do it well. Three, that those jobs getting done means benefit all across the board. So, gee, we could either take the capitalist route and, screw everyone other than me and my pocketbook, or we can take the socialist route and say, well, a rising tide raises all ships. And ultimately, we're all looking to go out on a little, yachting adventure out here on the bay, on the San Francisco Bay, right? So we might as well utilize that rising tide and see what we can do to make it really work for everyone, rather than be the Richard Branson of, the whole thing and say, no, my super duper mega yacht with its own helicopter, and 3 outboard actual boats, not dinghies, but like speedboats. This takes precedent and priority over anyone and everyone's everything that lives here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I matter the most. I need my thing, my gigantic eyesore, to be the centerpiece, and no one can have any space, even though it's their space. No one can have that because I want it, and I say that I'm the most important. Not to pick on Richard Branson, just saying, it's a very clear-cut example of privileged elitism, I guess you could say.
I just wanted to point out Daniel would like to make a comment, so if we could go to him in a minute or two.
Yeah. So that's kind of spelling out what the party is and some examples, right, of what it would be like. Why we need it is because all of those scenarios I've pointed out are based in our current reality.
Okay, great. Daniel, you wanted to say something?
Oh yes, I want to say that I agree everything what Jason is saying, and I agree everything what John Drake is saying. And also a couple months ago, they happened a couple months ago, and when Andrea counted, they would have a meeting to solve the homeless problem, but it turned out that it was so controversial. They happened a couple months ago. They were having a meeting to stop the homeless problem, but it didn't. And then the idea was to catch up the homeless, and there were Democrats in the counter. And the people, a woman in the crowd got so pissed off that he wanted to jump out. That actually happened, and the police were there. They were pretty insane. There was anyone actually.
Okay. We're going to go over a couple of facts for socialism. We'll come right back to discussion. So just to repeat, overview of the market for socialism. Bernie Sanders beat Joe Biden in the 2020 election. major newspapers are saying that people are not worried about the word socialism in California anymore. From Cal Matters, 2016, Bernie Sanders almost beat Hillary Clinton. There was a CBS poll recently that showed 57% of California Democratic voters were open to socialism. 1934, Upton Sinclair was a socialist and won governorship. So we had a flirting with it in the 30s, and then we seem to be back from the 2016 to 2020 election with increasing acceptance of socialism. That was proof of the market for socialism. Now, where are socialists most active? Nowhere are socialists more active, or the Democratic Socialists of America, which is a party we're not associated with, but they did run some candidates. They had a lot of help winning candidates in Echo Park, Koreatown. Now, when Bernie Sanders was here in the 2020 election, he did best in three congressional districts: Santa Clara County, San Jose de Gilroy, downtown Los Angeles. I'm sorry, these two districts. Basically, San Jose de Gilroy and downtown LA, aka South Central East Los Angeles. That's also where the Democratic, if I could just finish, please. That's also where the Democratic Socialist won, is in the Echo Park, East Los Angeles area. Yes.
I just want to point out that when I ran for governor, those happened to be the biggest places I got my votes as well.
Okay, so your data backs it up that maybe the East LA, Koreatown, and then San Jose area up north.
I did strangely well amongst the Asian community, as well as in Los Angeles. I beat Caitlyn Jenner in her own area, and I also did fairly well in what do you call it, in San Francisco and Alameda County.
Okay, so you did well in SF and Alameda, and you did okay in San Jose, which also backs up where these other socialists did well. And then you're saying you also did well in the Echo Park, Koreatown area.
I beat Caitlyn Jenner in their own hometown.
So it sounds like, sorry, come on, San Jose and Koreatown. Those are two big. Yes, there's some evidence for San Francisco and Alameda, but it looks like San Jose, Koreatown are big areas where there's a market for socialists. That's one. A little bit more data on that. Alex Lee. Sorry.
If I may, real quickly, there was one other piece that I was going to add to why we need it, and that's because Senator Bernard Sanders was the guy that California wanted. The Democrats of California and national are not really truly aligned with him, with what he was, with what he was saying, with what he's about. Californians, at least roughly 36%, wanted this, wanted these things. These things are not being represented by the powers that be in California. These things are regularly actively worked against by not just the powers that be in California, but ultimately the powers that be that run the powers that be in California. So, in order to meet the wants and needs of, at the very least, 36% of California's voters, that's a huge chunk, folks. We're not talking 2%. We're not talking 15%. We're talking 36% bare minimum base standard starting point. Like how I talk about why do we feel that Trump probably actually is going to beat Biden if Biden runs again? Because Biden's support base starts at somewhere in the 30% and gets maybe as high as 48 to 50%, whereas Trump's voter base nationally actually starts roughly around 50%. meaning he has very little work to do to secure extra, outside votes in order to win. So 36% is a rather large chunk for California. And remember, the Dems have like somewhere between 60 and 70%, something like that. And most of these policies are the things that they regularly use to stay in power, get re-elected, or just elected for the first time, and then, they quickly forget about it, and we didn't see these things coming that, would change the face of this and that and the other and mean that we can't follow through on these campaign promises. We got blindsided. Here, give us more money, donate to our campaigns, and help keep us in power so that we might be able to potentially do something about it one of these millennia. Yeah, well, our party, our thing is hardcore, all about actually finally seeing all those changes happen. If you're part of that 36% of California that wanted those changes not really all that long ago, chances are high you'd probably still want those things since none of them have been followed through on by the powers that be. Which means, knowing that there is a party that is going to be hardcore, staunch in our stance, dedicated to seeing this through, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here, and I'm going to say this is probably the party for you. This is probably the party that you've been wanting and looking for, and that 36% is too large of a portion to disregard. Any portion is really too large to disregard. However, more than 1/3 of California's voters want this, feel this way, think about this. That right there alone is proof enough that we need this, because no one else is representing this. People are sometimes falsely claiming to be the champions of this, but I think the proof is in the pudding, right? We know the corporate sellouts on Team Red and Team Blue are never, ever, ever going to follow through on these things. They are hollow promises that they use to trick the voters into keeping them in power. If we want something different, we have to make something different. We have to build a new mechanism, implement it, and stick with it, and work it all together. This party is that mechanism. That's why we need this.
Okay. Very good, very good. Continuing with some statistics, we were talking about Echo Park, Koreatown, San Jose seems to be two big areas from previous elections where Bernie did well and other socialist candidates. There's also two socialist candidates in the California state government. One was in the San Fernando Valley and another one was in San Jose. Alex Lee is the only socialist in the legislature at this time, and he's from San Jose, and Bernie won in that area. So it looks like San Jose in the north and Echo Park in the south are the two major areas. By the way, Daniel Santoro is in East LA near Echo Park. If we look at some of the demographics of who supports socialism the most and why, basically we want to focus on voters 18 to 30 years old because they have a 50% chance of supporting socialism. According to surveys, if you are 18 to 30 years old, not older than 30, there's a 50% chance you back socialism. No other age group comes even close, according to polling. Additionally, women ages 18 to 54 show an almost 45% chance they back socialism. So the youth up to 18, up to 30 years old, after 30 years old, there's some traction with women, particularly moms, but no traction with males. So I understand that's weird because I think Jason and I are over 30 and are, part of this. So we're not backing up the statistics, but generally that's the statistics we want to focus on. Young people 18 to 30 and maybe moms. We got a 50% chance there. People who are over 50, they don't really want to hear it. Now, what motivates that group? Well, we have an exact quote. It's the platform, it's the policies. Those outlast any person, and those are generational ideas, said Agnew 34. Young voters, and this is an exact quote, are less preoccupied with electability by a 2-to-1 margin. Voters under 34 said in the 2020 election they wanted to see bold policy changes instead of narrow focuses. So 18 to 30-year-olds, they are less concerned about political math and electability, and they are more concerned about someone's actually proposing the right thing to do. If we want to look at how many socialist voters are in California, going off what Jason was talking about, with 36% of the vote in the last election, California has the highest number of registered voters at 18 million. The California Democratic Party has 46.8% of all registered voters. Bernie Sanders won 36% of the California Democratic primary. That means there's about 3 million registered voters who are socialist and have no one to vote for. 3 million voters in California with no one to vote for and nowhere to go. If we convert those voters to money, we're looking at about 4 million in annual donations. So 3 million voters are sitting out there. Nobody's reaching out to them. They contribute about $3.9 million annually to a political party that does nothing for them. If you look at some of the other surveys that showed you had 46% supporting socialism, or that one survey by CBS TV that showed 57%, then you can see the low ball. If it's 36, we're looking at about 3 million voters and $4 million in political donations. If it's about 53%, according to one survey, we're looking at 4.5 million voters with close to $6 million in annual political donations. If it's 57%, as according to that one CBS poll, we're looking at close to 5 million voters with about $6 million in annual donations, all untapped, all without a party that's reaching out to them. That's basically the argument. Now, what are the major arguments for and against socialism that we will have to deal with? Basically, it breaks down into two things. Pollsters found that 4% of Americans thought socialism signified government ownership or control of business utilities and everything. About 12% of respondents associated socialism with equality. But when the Gallup asked those same polls, they got some different percentages. Basically, it comes down to, here's the number one criticism that we are going to face against the California Socialist Party. It encourages people to not work and for the government to control more. That's the number one criticism polling shows against socialism. We are going to be hit with, you want people to not work and you're encouraging them to not work, and you want the government to control everything. Now, the reason that people are attracted to socialism is because they say it builds a more fair and equitable society, and it provides an alternative to capitalism. If you look at what John Drake said earlier and what Jason Wright just said, that's what they were talking about. They literally just made this point. The Dems talk a big game, but don't deliver. People want these things. People need these things. People know they need these things to have a better life. Dems say they're going to do it and then don't do it. So socialism is actually delivering the goods and making a more equitable system. And I got to tell you, I'm a capitalist, but capitalism is the most unpopular it has been since Adams wrote that book introducing capitalism. I mean, it has the least amount of support in America.
Wealth of Nations.
Sorry?
Wealth of Nations.
Wealth of Nations. Yes, thank you. Since Wealth of Nations, capitalism is the least popular it's ever been.
And may I say why?
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
Back to you, Jason.
Yeah. The reason why capitalism has such a horrible rap to it is because a lot of the modern economic issues that are facing Americans in general, but especially Californians, certainly Californians, can be attributed to capitalism. For example, many of our wars are fought for the sake of private gain. When the United States goes into another country and takes over an oil field, it's not us who benefit. It's the oil companies that then lease the land and then sell back that oil to us at an exponential rate, or even doing that same thing here at home. Capitalism under the Reagan administration, both as governor and as president, sacrificed the long-term sustainability of our society economically, socially, politically, and environmentally for the short-term profits that did not even go to benefit the vast majority of the middle or lower classes. They all ironically trickled up to the already extremely wealthy. And so it's no secret that capitalism is on the decline. I mean, first and foremost, I would identify myself in any way, shape, or form as an anti-capitalist, because capitalism has done nothing but tear this society apart. I mean, I find it ironic that there are people who are criticizing, no one that they want to criticize socialism because, nobody, quote unquote, wants to work. No, people want to work. It's just that they're not going to work for the horrible wages and take on the abuse of their corporate overlords. No one's going to do that. And not only that, I would also argue that in general, people know their worth. And so when you're working, so when you're looking at other developed nations, like Germany, that has a very comparable GDP to the state of California, or even through population like France, or just all of these factors, we are not insured anything by continuing down this course. I'm not saying I'm not saying we force every company to be state run. I'm not suggesting a state planned economy. But what I am suggesting is that this reality that we are living in doesn't have to be the reality that we are chained to. We can move forward, we can build better, we can become stronger, and we can treat our workers and our citizens with all the dignity and respect that it takes to make a society flourish. And that's not what we're doing right now. And no one in power is talking about that, because they're all bought and sold by the same people who buy and sell their quote unquote political adversaries. The same oil barons and oil tycoons that buy Republicans buy the Democrats.
The same Raytheon and Halliburton type warmongers who go and, help pull the U.S. and all of her people, which right now does still include us, unfortunately, in my opinion. They buy people on both sides. Well, okay, maybe they don't buy people on both sides. They donate to people on both sides in the hopes that it might influence decisions. And yeah, exactly what you were saying. It goes in with what I was saying about, sure, maybe a company can find someone to work for $1 an hour, but ultimately, how likely is that company to exist in 10, 20 years, right? Because ultimately, people are going to get fed up working for $1 an hour when the cost to live is $25 an hour.
Yes,
and then the likelihood they're going to find other people to replace those who have left is slim to none.
Yes, and it should also be mentioned that markets exist in socialist societies. It just depends on how those markets are utilized and who those markets work for. I'm not suggesting a collapse of any market. I am suggesting that the markets that exist work to better the lives of the people who are buying those products and selling those products, and not those who simply own the means of production, because they may own the equipment, but they're producing nothing for the society, especially when they're outsourcing that labor. And that's the whole thing is that I care so much about Californians that I want their labor to be compensated at the highest value possible, at the highest rate possible. I mean, I hear arguments that that minimum wage is for minimal skill, or minimum wage is for minimum effort. Minimum wage is literally just legally the lowest you can pay someone. It doesn't mean minimum skill. It just means that if it didn't exist, companies would find a way to pay you nothing.
Exactly. And, you know, to further that, it's that good business practice, right? Like, and we're talking socialism here versus capitalism. And we, the socialists, are talking about good business practice. You practice good business. You make sure that those workers stay alive and happy and healthy. You will continue to have workers. Having those workers generates revenue. Generated revenue equals economic security. See how this goes, folks? It's just
right.
Good business. And capitalism has lost sight of that. Capitalism is currently actively practicing horrible business practices.
Yeah, let's get back to Marcus, and because I'm curious as to where else this conversation is going to go.
Yeah, I wanted to show you guys this, if I may, real quick, just to back you up on the two-party system. So let me show you this quote real quick. Okay. Oops.
Return, they show you claimed a $960 million loss, which means you could have avoided paying personal federal income taxes for years. Did you use that $960 million loss to avoid paying personal federal income taxes?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And so do all of her donors, most of her donors. I know many of her donors. A lot of my write-off was depreciation and other things that Hillary, as a senator, allowed. And she'll always allow it because the people that give her all this money, they want it. See, I understand the tax code better than anybody that's ever run for president. Hillary Clinton has friends that want all of these provisions, including they want the carried interest provision, which is very important to Wall Street people. Number one, I pay tremendous numbers of taxes. I absolutely used it, and so did Warren Buffett, and so did George Soros, and so did many of the other people that Hillary is getting money from. Now, I won't mention their names because they're rich, but they're not famous, so we won't make them famous. Wow, that hurt.
The New York Times published 3 pages of your
Okay,
1995 tax
so let me show you that. And the point I was showing you is that if you look at Hillary Clinton's face, she goes from smiling to just frozen face, meaning it's all true. And she never contradicted what he said ever. So Donald Trump just basically outed them as a uniparty. So you can say whatever you want about me, but there's this donor class, and you and I both do whatever they want. And I love how Hillary's face is smiling like this guy's an idiot until he starts laying it out, and then she's like. So it's all one party. They're all in bed with each other. There is no real difference, backing up what the two of you guys just said. I also want to show you this, if I can. This is a new poll from our friends at Zogby Polling. So this is Zogby Polling. This poll just came out. Zogby Polling just came out. Jeremy Zogby, he's been on our show a couple times. And I want to show you this one question they asked everybody. The survival of democracy. Choices are, it's the other party that threatens the survival of our democracy, or it's the two-party system that pits us against each other is the problem. 46% of Americans said it's the two-party system is the problem. Only 1/3 of Americans said it's just the other party. When we look at Democrats, matching percentages of Democrats say it's the two-party system is the problem as much as they say it's the Republican Party. So on the news, you're going to hear the Dems say it's all the Republicans. No, they don't. Matching numbers say it's the two-party system itself. A majority, 48% of Republicans say that, and over half of independents. So when we look at those numbers, we can see people think the two-party system's garbage. Oh, I guess we lost John. But that was an important statistic to bring up when we're talking about why there's a Socialist Party and why there's interest in one. I'll turn it over to Jason. Hopefully John will come back, and then we can wrap up the discussion. Jason, any comments?
Yeah, no, I have been saying for a long time that the corporate autocracy, the polarizing duopoly, this is not only what America has become, what it is antithetical to what the people who made America, you know, on paper, with like the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and all of that jazz. You know, it's antithetical to what they envisioned, what they wanted, what they saw that was needed in order to maintain a prosperous and civilized social structure. What we're working on here is actually more in line with what those who seek democratic due process and true freedom, right? And not just America, but like, you know, lots of European countries, right? They've been through all sorts of stuff in history, some recent, some not so recent. And it's proven to them over and over again that they need something better. They need something that works for everyone. And over the last like 20 years or so, they've been going actively pursuing it. And so they've been setting a good example for us on, you know, one, that it can be done, and two, how to go about it in a way that means that it can actually get done.
Nice. Okay, John Drake. I just showed a survey showing that about 46% of the public thinks the two-party system is the problem, and only 1/3 think it's the actual other party. So you have a 2-to-1 of Americans saying the two-party system is the problem itself. We just showed a clip of Donald Trump where he was attacking Hillary Clinton by saying, you know, Hillary Clinton says I'm a bad person, but all her donors are my donors too. And everything I'm for, her donors love too, and she'll do the exact same thing, proving it's basically a uniparty. Thoughts from you, John Drake, as we wrap up?
Yeah,
I actually have one other thing that I was going to add.
Womp womp. I'm answering. Feel free. But first, I will say, I think that's very much true, because anytime I start talking politics and start talking about parties, I'm always hearing from someone, "Oh, I hate the two-party system," and it's because the two-party system isn't it's because the two-party system we have is so horrible, because the parties simply don't work. And I'm going to use China as an example, because I want us to sort of recognize the difference between Western civilization and Eastern civilization for just a quick second. Here in the West, what makes a party or a government legitimate is elections and the ability to vote for your next leader or representative or even a party. But in the East, in China, for example, right, what makes an entity or government legitimate is the effectiveness and the ability for that government to run and govern effectively. Meaning improving the lives of their citizens as much as possible. And that's one reason why you don't see a lot of dissent from the vast majority of people in China against their party. Obviously, there's things like human rights violations, but what I'm talking about is the capacity in which that government has the ability to create change makes that uniparty system, or more like, or more as I should say, that one-party state more efficient compared to California, where our party, the party that we have here in power, is inefficient. It's not solving the issues it's meant to solve, and that's one reason why this one party system we have here in California, or the two party system we have here in the United States, is so deeply despised, because these parties, not only are they working for the same goal, to please their corporate donors and corporate overlords, but they are simply ineffective at creating the change that not only are they promising, but changes that will astronomically improve the material conditions of their populations. China is the only country in the past 80 years to actually have improved the quality of life for their citizens. It's the only country that's been able to do that, and the United States, shockingly enough, has not been able to do it, and it's because of the single interest. It's because of the special interest and money infiltration that exists in the parties that exist out here, and so what we have to offer, it being so different, not we're not taking corporate money, we're not trying to serve businesses, or we're not trying to serve corporations, we're not trying to serve any sort of multi-billion dollar entity or group.
We're not.
We're not.
Yeah, I'm out.
Because of that fact, I believe we will be able to not only garner a huge amount of support, but we'll be able to actually get things accomplished, and not only rule legitimately, but govern effectively. And that's the thing that matters.
Jason, thoughts, feelings on what John said as we move towards wrapping it up? You had something else you wanted to say too.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that, like, you know, what Trump was saying about, you know, his donors are her donors. Don't forget that, you know, I like to watch Breaking Points, so I first heard about it on Breaking Points with Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball. There was an individual, a private citizen, who specializes in doing things online and researching and pulling up information, and through a lot of personal effort and research and compilation of data, they proved which elected officials, one, are actively buying into companies that are the antithesis of what they say they're about. So, like, you know, anti-war Democrats who buy Raytheon stock, or you know, anti-big oil Democrats who own a bunch of ExxonMobil stock, right? And then also the ways that they vote. So, like, this Democrat who says that they're against the big oil companies, yet buys into the big oil companies, how are they voting when votes come up that might affect these big oil companies? 9 times out of 10 or more, they're voting in a way that benefits the big oil companies, even though their stance is screw the big oil companies. So this report is out there. It's very, very, very detailed. It's like this kid put every elected official on blast. And yeah, right? See right there. It's the fallout is still coming down. And Nancy Pelosi even has faced some of that fallout herself. She was asked immediately and pushed immediately for, will the Democrats, who are, like, you know, the champions of justice and, you know, what is right and good for America, will they push to enact some sort of legislative measure that would prevent elected officials who, you know, make decisions on laws which would affect companies. Well, these elected officials should no longer legally be allowed to play the stock market because, like, you know, it's serious backdoor or backroom unfair advantage, insider trading, pretty much. Like, you know how the vote's gonna go because you're the one voting on it. Like, it only makes sense that that should not be allowed. And Pelosi's initial response was that there's nothing wrong with it, it's perfectly legal, and they should all be allowed to keep doing it as they've been doing. Once she faced some backlash over that, then she started changing her tune to the effect of, well, maybe we'll look into it. And again, folks, this is the big difference between us and them. Us being the socialists of California and them being the corporate sellouts. They will only ever, one, get to the point of saying, yeah, you know, we might look into it at some point. We'll consider looking into it. Doesn't mean they're actually gonna look into it, let alone do anything on it. But they will only get to that point once they are forced to be at that point. We are already long past that point. We've already considered it. We've already looked into it. We're already trying to formulate legislative proposal so that hopefully someday soon we will have people running from our party elected into offices around California so that they can enact these things. Not, we might consider potentially one day talking about whether or not to look into the feasibility of a potential solution. Possibly. You see the big difference here, folks? One is we know what we want and we're pretty sure how to go about getting it. And the other is, well, we really just want to stay in power and keep making money, and however we need to, you know, make it sound in order to achieve that, so be it. Because ultimately, those people are all on the same team. They are the 1%.
Yeah. Okay. John left. Daniel wants to make a comment, and then we'll close it out.
Oh, okay. So I think the two-party idea, the two-party system is kind of like one of the, I absolutely hate it. I think it should be like more option. Like, who want, I mean, Democrat and Republican or just corporate. I don't think none of them. I think it should be more option for like voting. Kind of feeling a little bit hungry right here. I'm going to eat later. But I think it should be like more option right to vote, right? And I want to vote for communist, I will vote for communist. And I want to vote for green, I want to vote for green. And I totally agree with Jason and John are saying.
Okay. Well, I will just leave it off with reviewing some of the policies the party's looking at. These are not explained. These are just rough ideas. Rent control, minimum wage higher than what the Democrats suggest. No requirement for previous experience for minimum wage jobs. Indigenous people get access to sacred sites across California. And into private sector prisons and into private sector hospitals. Mandatory 2 weeks paid vacation, paternity, maternity, and free daycare for working parents. Tech headquarters in California has to pay taxes on data mining. No urban area can expand without providing 100% of the housing needs. Californians have an inalienable right to live in an environment free of pollution in the Constitution. Putting on if a candidate has accepted corporate money on the actual voting ballot with the use of a symbol, no company can take CA water and then resell it to us. Clean water is a right in California. Nationalize the big five resources to insulate California with price fluctuations: water, oil, food, healthcare, energy. Bar religious leaders from occupying government buildings in protests. limit protests of any healthcare facility, abortion facility to at least 1 mile from the site, enact original BLM police reform measure that had 3 essential parts scrapped by the California Democratic Party. Police can't accept private donations, military equipment without state policy approval. Given California's commitment to no gas cars, and then had a power outage and said to unplug the electric car in order to not tax the power grid. The only way to achieve climate change goal of no gas cars is reliable power, and the only way to do that is to reactivate nuclear power plants. Plus, this will reduce electric prices for the most vulnerable, aka the poor. Decriminalize all drugs. Now, those are just policy ideas. They're being worked out. Some will be kept, some will not be kept, some will be fleshed out. And we are looking for help to flesh those ideas out, but that's roughly what the party is looking at. Jason, take us out. Last minute comments.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, as a lifelong green since 18, I am 100% against nuclear fission. I am, however, 100% for nuclear fusion. Fission, very dirty, very wasteful. We could go into how archaic the whole mechanism is at some other point. If someone would like to discuss nuclear physics, I am more than willing. I could talk nuclear physics like literally all day and night. Totally against fission. Totally for fusion. And have been keeping my eyes on it for a while. Was there at the Global Greens conference back in February, helping my fellow Greens who are very much against most kinds of nuclear anything, right? Helping them to become aware of fusion and its cleanliness and its safety and the viability for our future. I would personally like to see our stance on nuclear evolve ever so slightly into something more along the lines of, you know, like what's said and then semicolon. And because fission is no longer viable, and we realize this, that we would push California to be the world leader in fusion technology, both power generation as well as, you know, like it could be applied for all sorts of things other than just power generation for, like, you know, the power grid. A lot of modern naval vessels use nuclear fission power plants. If they weren't going around the oceans with nuclear fission power plants, but nuclear fusion power plants instead, which don't have all those harmful byproducts and waste products and whatnot, that right there alone could help humanity to, one, kind of stem the flow of toxic, poisonous, detrimental, you know, stuff that we're putting out there, but also, two, to help us in getting more green and developing future technologies. You know, these things that for the last 20, 30 years, we've considered it future technologies. Well, guess what, folks? Fusion is here. It's here. It's actually modern technology now. It's not future anymore. It's time that we get with the times. And, you know, I think that us, you know, we with the Calexit movement know that the world tunes in to California and looks at us as world leaders, looks to us to set an example. And should we push for California to set this example towards nuclear fusion and away from nuclear fission, we really could help to lead the world even more so on this push towards clean and green than we've already done, which, you know, again, if you're part of the Cal Exit movement, you will have heard many, many times how California has acted on its own, as its own, has gone and attended world summits for things like global green, you know, policies, climate change action, you know, all of this stuff. Has even done such a good job that the, you know, leaders of the rest of the world said, "Hey, California, can you host the next gathering of this?"
Right, right.
So, folks, let's maybe consider to help push California towards fusion, clean nuclear, not just reestablishing nuclear, but if we're going to do that, let's do it right. Let's go clean nuclear.
I was really just looking for a general overview instead of a zeroing down on a policy. I'm sorry, but I have to say John has a different opinion than you, and this is why I've been saying to the two of you for the last 3 weeks, boy, do we really need to have that detailed policy discussion. So John's already on record saying the opposite. So this is just a good learning thing. We need to start getting together and fleshing those policies about what it is and getting everybody on board.
If I may, I do know John's stance on the nuclear thing seems to come from constituents who, you know, they are reliant on this nuclear power facility, and the people there are safe. They're not being, you know, poisoned and turned into glow-in-the-dark 50-eyed creatures with tentacles and stuff like that, you know. And I know that, you know, his stance is based in these people need this. It's the wants and needs of the people, right? Which that's what we're about. And so I'm not like disagreeing with it. I'm just trying to say like, yes, and.
Okay, well, I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong, but we have one video from John that says one thing, and now we have a video from you that says something different. So for the public, that might seem confusing, and I think it's a good point of what I've been warning. We have got to get together and get everybody on board and flesh these detailed points out. Been saying it for 3 weeks. We really need to do that. But I was just looking for a general comment. Basically, the meeting's over. We're going to wrap it up. So take us away, Jason. General comments on thing, 1 minute, and then we'll wrap it up.
If you're a voter in California, if you or someone you know or love is a Californian, you may want to pay attention to this party as it forms. You may want to have the talk, so to speak, with your loved ones. You may wish to see a better future for yourself, those you know and love. Also, any potential future loved ones. You know, some of us hope to have children someday, and for those of us who do, think about the future for those children. Think about what things are at right now and what they might look like should things continue on the way they're going. And try and envision, you know, your own offspring in that world. Is that something that you feel is good? Is that something that you would be pleased to leave your child in? Or would you want something better, something different? If you want something better, if you want something different, consider joining this party. Consider helping to build it. Consider helping to change the face of California and California politics very specifically before it's too late. things have been going downhill. We all know this. Things are only snowballing faster and faster. It is quickly becoming an avalanche. If we don't want to get buried alive in the avalanche, we need to do something about it. And this party is our mechanism to do something about it. All we have to do is come together as Californians, agree that what we want and need is not being given to us or provided to us by the current powers that be, and agree to replace them through legal, electoral, and legislative means.
You heard it here. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. We provided a lot of details. You were able to hear from some of the leaders themselves. Should provide a lot of information about what the party is, how we're thinking, what we're looking at doing, and where it's going. We need you to get involved. Leave it there. Thank you much for being here, and we will see you soon.